Hey Facebook universe. Today Danny and I have decided that we're going to try to locate modern guns in our collection. And why are you holding a flintlock, Danny?
Because this flintlock repo is actually one of the most modern guns in the collection, and I was hoping you wouldn't catch that, but you did.
Did you say repo or repro?
I said repo.
Oh look, it's Friday morning.
It's Friday.
It's actually Friday morning with Danny and Ashley.
Live.
We're doing a Facebook Live. Don't put your thumb on that. This just looks bad. All right, so we are standing here in front of our recent refinements case, and it's personally one of my favorite cases in the museum because it's kind of ironic because the start of the case starts in the late 1800s and early 1900s with some of the early versions of a semi-auto. You've got the C93, which is the Borchardt, which is one of the first commercially successful semi-automatics. Then some other sci-fi looking guns with the... Did you just hand the talking stick off?
I did.
That lasted really long. Actually, pan around. We want to introduce some people before we get on.
Interns.
Interns, unite. These are our special case. These are interns, Kirsten and Kyle.
Thank you.
And they just started here, and we actually think we're going to let them hijack Facebook Live next week and run around the galleries because we have board meetings. So that's the first time they're hearing of that, but we'll prepare them. I think you guys will really enjoy them. They're doing some great work here at the Cody Firearms Museum. All right, so back to modernity.
Ooh, fancy word.
But this recent refinements case comes off of, you want to put it down here, a bolt action case. And this is our evolution of sporting arms and action types in the gallery. But as you can see, we get all the way to the end and we run out of room. One thing about linear displays, it's not great, is that you do run out of room at some point. And so we've got, obviously very, I don't want to use the word progressive, but very advanced models for the late 19th century, early 20th century, but not exactly modern in the sense. And as you pan down, though, I will say this really little case spans a lot of time. Yeah, the nutty gyrojet. We actually have way too many gyrojets. We've got some more in the vaults. And basically a lot of guns that were kind of experimenting with various types of lightweight capacities. We've got a Remington nylon that Tom Fry, the Remington exhibition shooter, used to break a world record. And you come all the way over here. So where were we? 1890s. It's a Glock. 1980s. So that's fun.
Advances we get.
We covered a lot of ground in that, but I'll also point out this little guy here because it's an older gun. It's a Whitney Wolverine. It was an aluminum firearm, but Olympic Arms, which they did a reboot of it. I can't remember how many years ago, but so hey, that's at least a little bit more contemporary. But that's one of the things we're trying to fix at this museum is that we really don't think that there's a historical cutoff date for history. So we are starting to become a bad penny in the gun industry, and we go to SHOT Show, we go to NRA. I was just at the industry summit earlier this week because we want more modern guns in our museum. And Danny and I were talking about the 1960s and 1970s. You want to talk about kind of what happened in the 1970s and why we don't really have guns past the 1970s?
So in 1968, the Gun Control Act passed, and in the 1970s...
You just took that way more serious than that. No, you're totally on point. Go.
So as gun regulations have been introduced throughout the century, there's never been any real exception made for museums to collect firearms. So we have a lot of legal hurdles when we want to collect a modern firearm. So for example, if we wanted to collect a M16 as used by the military in the 1990s and early 2000s, we couldn't because they're restricted by the Hughes Amendment and the NFA Act and things like that. So there's no special dispensation, big word, Friday.
Dispensation. Oh, and that's one of the things we encountered. And when we wrap up today, you'll go see our Glock exhibit, which is something we're trying to do in the short term to get some more modern firearms in the collection. But we wanted a G18 for the Glock exhibit. And how'd that work out for us?
Not well. Because
of the machine gun ban of 1986, we actually aren't able to collect modern automatic firearms because the law letter doesn't apply to us because we're not demonstrating them. So we kind of have some hurdles. But there are plenty of guns that we can collect that are more modern. And one of the reasons that we haven't really done that was that when Winchester gave us the collection or loaned us the collection in 1975 and then gifted it in 1988 was that they had collected up to the contemporary for the times.
Is that what you really wanted
That's
to talk
what
about?
you wanted to talk about. But that's my bad because I didn't prompt you that well enough. But in the 1970s, they kept their collection pretty up to date. But the problem was is when they gave it to us, we had this collection, we had several other manufacturers' collections, but there really wasn't a lot of active collecting going on between the 1970s up through today, because the mission of the organization was obviously interpreting a lot earlier in our history. But since 1991, when the museum opened, and 2017, ooh,
It's a long time.
it's a long time. We have started to embrace the fact that we have an encyclopedic collection, and we're trying to backfill a lot of the stuff from the 1970s and onwards that we haven't seen. Let's walk around the corner and we'll look at another case that's kind of run out of room. But one of the things that we're trying to do, I love walking backwards. It's my favorite thing. One of the things we're trying to do in the new museum is set up exhibits that can be rotated as new inventions are developed, as we hit new milestones in firearms history. And we've got a separate timeline that will have an entire section on polymer frame guns, the experimentations in polymers, Armalite. Big hands for Armalite. We're trying to definitely incorporate the fact that the modern industry is a part of our story, and what they're making today is a part of tomorrow's history. I've said that like 5 times this week. But we are starting to acknowledge that, because we realize that you only have so many square feet, and you've got to come up with creative ways to be able to shift. Oh my gosh.
That's how things get broken.
I've worked here for 6 years. Apparently, I don't know where I'm going. All right. Is that my business card? Yeah. Okay. I was about to make such a poignant statement. What happens?
What happened was?
What happens when you run out of space is that a lot of times, it's like, whatever, you just don't have modern guns. But, as we kind of continue to develop the collection, and one of the big parts of our museum is military history, and we have a lot of veterans that come into the museum, and we love having our veterans come in. We love talking to them. But one thing that happened in our military wing is that, again, we ran out of room. And so you'll see, if you want to pan up, Jesse, to the Vietnam War and the Gulf War, and it's this tiny little case, that can't even fit an M60. I mean, it's an attempt to start to continue to move our way into the future and forward, but it really doesn't do justice to our veterans, especially our Vietnam veterans, our Gulf War veterans that come in here, and they want to see the firearms like they see, the big cases of the Revolution, the big cases of World War I, the big cases of World War II. And so in the new museum, in our military wing that Danny's actually working on, why don't you talk about what we're doing in the new museum to make sure that our veterans feel like we can definitely interpret their histories and kind of continue that legacy forward.
It's weird to have the camera on me while you're still talking. So one of the things that we're writing right now, like Ashley said, is our new military interpretation. We're going to have a section dedicated to military history and military firearms in the new museum, and we're writing that timeline now to be much more encompassing of the collection that we have and of the military history that we can represent and educate about here. Because this case, the last date on it is 1991, and that was 25 years ago now. So there's 25 years of military history that we don't even really get to talk about. And like Ashley mentioned, we have lots of veterans that stop by that come in and talk to us and talk about their experiences and the equipment that they use, the firearms they used, and it's really great to talk to them and get that history. And oftentimes we don't have our side of that to share back with them, and it's something we definitely want to fix with the new museum.
Yeah, and one of the companies that we started a relationship with back pretty early in the museum's history was Ruger, and so that's probably one of our most contemporary displays that we have, although it dates back to 1949. But Bill Ruger was on our board, and he actually gave the name of the Cody Firearms Museum because we were originally the Winchester Arms Museum, and when we decided to build this wing for the collection, we had his personal firearms collection in here. We had Remingtons, we had Marlins, we had so many different gun manufacturers represented that he wanted to make sure that all the gun companies were represented in our museum. So he was very forward thinking in that respect to make sure that the Cody Firearms Museum name went forward so that we could continue to grow our history into the future. And a fun anecdote about that, if you want, you can pan, because the guns are probably way more exciting to look at than me. But if you want to pan down what we've got, because we do still get in a lot of, I think a couple of years ago was our earliest manufacturer, Rugers, that we need to put into the case. But the anecdote behind Mr. Ruger was that he was on our board, and we had the Winchester Museum, and because we are the Buffalo Bills Center of the West, you kind of can't get a better name than the Winchester Museum, but he really felt that we should be more representative of different gun companies, and so at a rather raucous board meeting, as I'm told, by the people who were there. He finally got fed up and he said, I will give you $1 million right now if you change the name to anything other than a firearms manufacturer. And what happened, Danny?
They changed the name, and he wrote the check on the spot.
Yay! So I think that's, yeah, I don't know, I'm very grateful for having someone like Mr. Ruger on our board who was able to kind of look at that and say, hey, if we want to grow, if we want to develop, we have this great encyclopedic collection. We can't be exclusionary. And, obviously we cherish our Winchester heritage. It's, the biggest collection in the museum, but we are encouraging modern firearms manufacturers to give us things that are coming off the line because it's really significant to what we want to do in the new museum, which is to continue everything into the future. But let's go and finish up in Glock, because a couple of years ago we did do a Glock exhibit. It's a temporary exhibit that'll be here probably until the opening of the new museum, because it was our first attempt. I shouldn't walk backwards. I think I'm not learning from my mistakes. Where is it? Lead the way with your musket, Danny.
Did our interns
Things that we
disappear?
Wanted to do. What's that?
Our interns disappeared.
I think they're listening to the educational program.
Oh,
They
okay.
weren't getting enough education from us, from our Facebook Live, so we sent them off to listen to our very, very wonderful volunteer, Mike Ludlow, who does the Firearms in the American West talk, where you can get hands-on with guns, learn about gun safety. It's really awesome if you get on site, because we do it twice a day, all summer. But the one thing that we wanted to do a couple of years ago was start this conversation of how we need to add modern guns into the museum. And Glock was having their 30th anniversary in the United States last year, and so we partnered with Glock in order to get a really neat contemporary exhibit. Like, I liken it to a contemporary art installation. I'm sure contemporary artists would not agree with me, but that's what I'm going to keep likening it to. So we'll wander this way. Also, I should probably mention, because this is a repro, this is one of our educational guns, that's why David's not wearing gloves. Well, I don't know who opened both doors for us, but that was real nice.
You haven't noticed? We're busy now.
Yes, our summer season has started, so we're super busy. But inside here is our Glock exhibition. We're really proud to have it. We've got early prototype manufactured Glocks, one of the first 1,000 Glocks imported into the U.S., the first U.S. manufactured Glock, all the way up to the Glock 42 and 43, which is actually one of my carry guns. So we wanted to show this exhibition, but what was really interesting was there was a lot of conversation. There's a video behind us, so I apologize for the sound. There was a lot of conversation when this came in here, because these kind of polymer frame guns, these black guns, a lot of people who are traditionalists were like, I don't get it. Why do you? They all look the same, which I have a big panel here that says, can you tell the difference? to kind of talk about that. But, they were like, they didn't understand it. And then when we had our opening and we did a little talk beforehand, and we had a lot of the Glock executives here, some people who were real naysayers to the project were like, we get it. Now, we get what Mr. Glock did in history and why that changed things, especially for their history. And we understand that even though it seems like recent history, we'll step out because that is really loud. Even though it is, quote unquote, recent history, it's relevant to being inside the Firearms Museum. So Glock makes history. And so we are really excited about the new museum. We're really excited about our ability to move more into the present, come out of the 1960s or the 1700s, 1700s, and really start to tell the story of our modern firearms industry and our firearms industry of the past 30 years. But like Danny said, we definitely have some hurdles, especially with the automatic firearms, because we don't have an amnesty, although we're having a symposium this summer to address that very issue on July 17th and 18th, because it is something it's a growing concern. And I spoke to a symposium last year where I said, you may not think 1986 is very long ago, but if that law doesn't change in 100 years, we'll have museums that don't have artifacts and pieces of history that are 100 years old. And so we're trying to...
And your comparison to a contemporary art museum as we walked around the corner was a very good one, because there's lots of contemporary art and lots of contemporary art museums, but I don't know of any contemporary firearms museums.
I don't. So we're really trying to lead the charge on that. We hope other, museums will follow suit. I know the NRA Museum has a little Glock exhibit that they travel with, and that they tell a holistic story. So we're just trying to really encourage this concept that modern is still history. But that makes no sense, but it really is relevant and important to us, and it's something that's constantly in our minds for the new design of the new museum, so that we can be more inclusive to the entire industry. Well, if you guys have any questions, or if you guys are a modern manufacturer and you're like, well shit, I want my guns in this museum, please reach out to us because we would love to have representation from a lot of the really important companies that are making waves in today's industry. So you guys know where to find us. If you got questions, we're
Happy
always
Actually
here.
Friday.
Happy Actual Friday. See you guys. Bye.